Last week in Michigan politics, bipartisan's the word at Governor Gretchen Whitmer's annual State of the State address. But did her appeal to a split legislature make any headway? We have details of and reaction to the speech. Plus, reported federal layoffs continuing reportedly out of Washington, how they could now start impacting an important weather service many depend on. And just how thin is the line between democracy and autocracy? After he fled his nation, we sat down with one journalist from half the world away to get his thoughts on what his experience taught him and why America should care. I'm Josh Alburtus, and this is your 13 on Your Side Rundown. Democrats and Republicans working together. That was a big part of Governor Gretchen Whitmer's State of the State address Wednesday night. We begin this episode at the state capitol in Lansing with details and reaction following the speech. Governor Whitmer seemingly playing to the moment here, striking a tone of bipartisanship as she faces the first partisan split in the legislature for the first time in years. But as she made those proposals and the plans of what she believes is the way forward, some of the Republican response we heard tonight skeptical as to whether that approach will last.
Bipartisan.
Delivering her 7th State of the State address, Governor Gretchen Whitmer laying out a vision amid a new playing field in Lansing. While the last 2 years had seen unified Democratic control under the Capitol dome, Republicans now in control of the state house. And under that reality, a repeated appeal to bipartisanship was palpable.
We don't always agree, but we move forward together. That is the source of our strength. Let's show the rest of the country how to get things done.
While there was mention of issues taking center stage out of Washington,
as I've said before, I'm not opposed to tariffs outright, but they are a blunt tool when the Michigan economy is on the line.
Statewide issues taking the vast majority of the governor's focus.
I know Speaker Hall is passionate about bringing accountability to the process, and I agree. In this year's budget, let's have total transparency on all earmarks. Because if you want to invest taxpayer money, you should put your name on it, right, Matt?
And the roads.
What's not okay is no plan. Michiganders won't accept inaction.
But what did House Republicans, who wanted talk of roads and government transparency, think?
But I did think, there were some positive things in there. You saw Governor Whitmer embracing part of the Hall Ethics and Accountability and Transparency Plan, which is to take these earmarks and disclose them.
For some, the devil's in the details that, even with this address, are far from determined.
Things that we can all get behind, but the question is how we get to the details.
If the governor's U-turn is real, then I think bipartisanship is going to be alive and well in Michigan. If it's just a facade and the 20 years of history is what's going to continue for the next 2 years, then I think it's just going to be more of the same.
How this address may affect the road and the tone ahead for this year in Lansing remains to be seen. And in the Michigan GOP's response to Governor Whitmer's State of the State address, that was given by Representative Brian Posthumus, Republicans seemed critical of Whitmer's management of the state budget, as well as her proposals for road funding.
Now the governor is talking about raising taxes again. We don't need to raise taxes. We don't need more money. We have more than enough money already. In fact, House Republicans already proposed a plan to fix the roads without costing you an additional penny. We need to focus on essentials first: infrastructure, public safety, education.
Posthumus saying he won't blame one party or the other for what he calls Michigan's decline, but that action needs to be taken on both sides to fix it. And in Washington, Michigan's newly elected U.S. Senator Elissa Slotkin will deliver the Democratic response to President Donald Trump's joint address to Congress next week. The speech will be Trump's first primetime address of his second term. Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer said Slotkin will offer a vision of hope for everyone, not just the wealthy few at the top, calling her nothing short of a rising star in the party. The address is Tuesday, March 4th, and is scheduled to start around 9 p.m. And back in Lansing this week, a Republican state representative proposed a resolution condemning a landmark same-sex marriage ruling in the United States. We break down what that resolution is looking to achieve. Legal same-sex marriage has been the law of the land across the United States for nearly a decade.
As I was growing up, it was illegal to marry somebody of the same sex, no matter how much you loved each other. And I don't want anyone to ever have to feel that feeling ever again.
But for one state legislator, the matter is anything but settled.
The American legal tradition, based on natural law, the will of the people, and constitutional originalism, upholds marriage as a union between a man and a woman. Any deviation from this definition undermines the legal and moral foundation of this republic.
On Tuesday, State Representative Josh Shriver unveiling a resolution condemning the Supreme Court of the United States' landmark 2015 decision in Obergefell v. Hodges, the decision that made same-sex marriage legal in all 50 states and nullified existing bans.
This blunder compromised the mother-father child-family unit.
It's an effort that a post on Shriver's X account said was meant to urge the Supreme Court to overturn its decision. But for fellow State Representative Jason Morgan, his own opposition to the effort is deeply personal.
This is not about some political debate. This is truly about people's lives. It's about my life and the life of so many other families who just want to love who they love and be committed to one another.
And he's not the only one opposing the push.
Some extreme members of the Michigan legislature are asking the U.S. Supreme Court to overturn marriage equality. Here's my response to that. Hell no.
A 2024 Gallup poll suggested that over 2/3 of Americans, 69%, supported legal same-sex marriage. Should Obergefell be overturned, while new federal law would require Michigan and all states to recognize marriages performed where it is legal, the state's dormant ban on same-sex marriage could reemerge.
We're scared right now. And so again, this extremist political theater does nothing more than gym up ideological, points for extremists.
While Shriver did not immediately take questions.
I'll take questions.
I don't think there's a lot of people sitting at their kitchen table thinking about, their neighbor's marriage, and that poses a problem to the well-beings of their futures and their families.
The Michigan Department of Education is responding to an advisory by the U.S. Department of Education for public schools to ensure compliance with civil rights law or possibly lose federal funding. In a memo sent to local and intermediate school district superintendents and public school academy directors, the Michigan Department of Education saying schools should consult with district legal counsel as a Saturday deadline looms. The memo said in part, quote, pre-K through 12 programs that promote diversity representing all children regardless of race and inclusion of all children regardless of race do not inherently harm particular groups of children and are not de facto violations of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, end quote. The memo said its contents should not be taken as legal advice. Now turning to the latest on reported federal funding cuts, reportedly causing layoffs at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA. An employee in the Ann Arbor office says about 20% of workers there were fired. 13 on your side's Julia Gorman talked with that employee, and she shares with us how that could impact our entire community and state.
It's something not everyone can say, but Nicole Rice loved her job.
They pulled the rug out from underneath us.
A communications specialist at the NOAA Great Lakes Environmental Research Lab in Ann Arbor, she's dedicated a decade to the agency. That is until she got this email Thursday afternoon informing her she's terminated. She spoke with me over the phone rather than on camera because she's been crying all day.
And the termination was due to our probationary status and that our skills were no longer needed by the United States government.
Rice says she's considered probationary because she was recently promoted. She tells me about 20% of her office was fired, or about 8 people, including her entire department.
We relay information to the public, to Congress, about all the great work that we're doing at the research lab, work that provides information about harmful algal blooms, about currents and waves and winds and lake effect snow.
Now she says that's not going to happen. Her lab's Facebook page, which often shared information about everything from invasive species to ice cover, waves, wind, and more, posted it's now on an indefinite hiatus.
Our front admin staff was also let go. So folks who answer the phone, folks who take inquiries from the public, folks who take questions about search and rescue operations, and like I mentioned before, harmful algal blooms, safety and navigation. No one is there to answer those calls. There is a dire impact when you start cutting away at these services for America and for the globe.
Julia Gorman, 13 on your side.
And as federal layoffs have continued, one local member of Congress is putting forward legislation she feels would bring more transparency and accountability to the Department of Government Efficiency. We spoke with that member of Congress on Friday, and she said she's aiming to enshrine a similar level of accountability for DOJ as compared to long-standing federal agencies. Recently, you had some saying it's good that waste is being cut in the government, making it, in their view, potentially more efficient. But Grand Rapids Congresswoman Hillary Skolton said some of what's been seen have been reckless cuts. So she said a new bill of hers would subject DOJ to the Freedom of Information Act that journalists and members of the public often use to get access to certain government records. Another, she said, would involve barring those without proper authorization from having access to private taxpayer data. That's what she explained to us about those, but she also spoke to us on the reportedly hundreds of firings at NOAA, data and research that people like our meteorologist here at 13 on your side can often depend on to predict and know. Take a listen to what she had to say on both of these topics.
Part of the problem with DOJ is that it is a temporary agency that is not subject to the same oversight and accountability measures as other agencies that arguably have the same, even lesser powers than DOJ has assumed. This is exactly what we are talking about with the reckless cuts that don't keep in mind the critical work that some of these federal workers are doing. Reported hundreds of cuts to NOAA right before severe weather season is upon us.
And it's now up to the Republican-led House whether those bills she mentioned will indeed be taken up. Across the country, town halls with elected officials have been getting crowds of concerned citizens. And as Republican Congressman John Molinar's staff hosted an event this week, even though the meeting was not a town hall and Molinar was in Washington, many still showed up to share their concerns about the federal government downsizing. It was a staff hour intended to be somewhere that those with casework with federal agencies could come and talk to staff about that casework, places like the IRS or the VA, according to Molinar's office. But even so, many showed up simply to express concerns about what they say has been happening out of Washington and relaying those questions and concerns they feel should be addressed. There were many references to the administration of President Donald Trump and its ties to Elon Musk as what the White House has reportedly described as an advisor to the president. Some felt Congress is in danger of abdicating its responsibility when it comes to federal oversight and the power of the federal purse. Concerns from things like what's reportedly been the cutting of many federal employees, in some people's view too broadly, and education, as matters of education and potential federal funding cuts have been top of mind for some in that space. We heard people asking questions that they said they wanted given to the congressman to answer. Here's what one person had to say.
I have a serious question. The first he must answer and take responsibility for. And that question is, what is the responsibility of Congress? If you know anything of the Constitution of the United States, the responsibility of a congressman is to hold the purse strings. It's a checks and balances, yeah.
When we spoke with the congressman's office that day, they made clear to us, again, this was not a town hall. This was meant for casework with federal agencies, and that they regularly engage with constituents, they said, to hear their concerns. Now to Your Voice, Your Vote, and Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson voicing her opposition to the proposed SAVE Act. Supporters of that federal legislation are promoting it as reasonable election security. Benson says that is not the case. Right now, people can register to vote at the Secretary of State's office by showing their driver's license as proof of citizenship. Under the proposed changes, a person would be required to use a passport, birth certificate, or naturalization paperwork. Benson says the bill will make the process so difficult, fewer people will register.
What this appears to be is an effort to take isolated circumstances, extrapolate them out to completely change an election system that would ultimately result in taking us backwards and having less people voting than before and making it more difficult for eligible citizens to participate in our elections.
Opponents also say the changes they feel would also affect military and rural voters by upending both mail-in and online voting. Specialty crop farmers need to be included when decisions are being made by the federal government. That's what the director of the Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development asserted when he testified to a U.S. Senate committee this week. The director said if specialty crop farmers are not included in the upcoming agriculture legislation, the state would suffer greatly. Specialty crops are crops that aren't major commodities like tree nuts and Christmas trees. Director Tim Boring said times are hard for specialty crops, with trade pressures, rising input costs, and climate variability putting the strain on farmers. He said if specialty crops aren't protected with new legislation, it would be detrimental.
I share all this today because the support of our specialty crops directly translates to the tools that keeps farmers farming, keeps rural communities vibrant, and keeps fruit and vegetables on the dinner plates across America.
Agriculture is a $105 billion industry in the state, and he believes that the more than 300 specialty crops produced are its backbone. The city of Muskegon Heights has been grappling for weeks with how to fill its city manager position as the interim manager was set to leave this month. Coming up, the latest on the search for an interim and perhaps a permanent replacement. In Muskegon County, still more questions than answers, it seems, about replacing the city manager in Muskegon Heights. A special meeting was held earlier this week to discuss the search, and 13 on Your Side's Kiara Patterson was there to give us the details.
It's important to remember that the job that I have, as well as the job that you have as elected officials, is to focus on what is best for the community.
Monday night, Muskegon Heights City Hall was packed with members of the community after the council held a special meeting to discuss updates on the city manager's position. City Manager Melvin Burns announced in January that he would be stepping down at the end of February.
I'm coming today to show my support of continuing to retain Mr. Burns as a consultant. He has been instrumental in lots of projects, and his knowledge is invaluable in maintaining the continuity of these essential projects that impact our business and our residents.
The council discussed Mayor Bonnie McLaughlin stepping into the city manager role temporarily until an interim is appointed. Councilperson Lachey Simmons then made a motion to discuss a top candidate already approved for consideration of interim city manager. After that approval at the last meeting, they learned that candidate was previously represented by the city attorney, and there were questions by some about a conflict of interest.
There is definitely a professional relationship between our city attorney and this candidate. Having known that information, I would have moved differently on that candidate. This was not a candidate that just applied for this position.
After more than 2 hours of discussion, council members still didn't come to an agreement of an interim or acting city manager. Ultimately, the council considered tabling the decision until the next meeting.
If we move forward to that continued vetting, to see if there's anything additional, and then we could further have that conversation about any additional concerns, is that possible?
A proposed ban on smoking and vaping at all parks in the city of Muskegon is not happening, at least for now, following a city commission meeting this week. As of now, smoking is banned in specific areas of some parks. What was on the table was an updated set of rules for parks in Muskegon, which would have banned smoking and vaping at all parks. The commission and the public, however, are not seemingly in agreement. There had been concerns regarding the rule change from both a commissioner and the public. Those included government overreach and unwarranted police interactions. At this meeting, there was a lot of back and forth between city leaders.
Our parks are shared spaces, not controlled spaces.
I don't feel any sense of compulsion about moving forward with a vape ban. It doesn't seem supported by the science or the community.
The commentary that I've seen on social media and online was a good number of people actually saying, no, I want to have smoke-free parks.
Several people also spoke during public comment, both for and against the rule change.
A clear case of government overreach and an unrealistic expectation for both Muskegon Police Department and park rangers.
It's one thing if people want to sit and smoke a cigarette in a car. It's another thing if they smoke the cigarette, toss their butts, and damage our Pure Marquette parks and our Lake Michigan.
The city manager said in part, quote, "The matter will now return to staff for further review, where they will determine whether to bring it back to the City Commission, refer it again to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee, or discontinue further action." In Ottawa County, the county's Republican Party is reacting to comments made by a precinct delegate in Chester Township, calling them abhorrent. That county party's executive committee put out a resolution on this situation involving Ryan Anderson, from whom we also heard via Facebook. These are the posts in question as confirmed by Anderson to be his. They read, quote, "Adolf Hitler is one of the true heroes of history," and, quote, "If the Holocaust didn't happen, then fascism is okay. The Holocaust didn't happen." The resolution describes the posts as historically false and, quote, "inconsistent with the beliefs and values of the Republican Party." The committee said the situation was sent to the Accountability Committee for review and, quote, "We will take appropriate action in accordance with our party's principles." Anderson sent a long statement that said in part, quote, "I'm not a Nazi. I don't hate anybody, and anyone who would imply such things about myself is woefully misguided or is making erroneous presumptions about my character." And over a dozen Ottawa County elected officials also responded to the situation with a statement Friday, saying in part, quote, "There is no place for this kind of hatred in Ottawa County, in Michigan, or anywhere in our country. We urge all citizens, regardless of a political affiliation, to join us in rejecting these vile ideologies and reaffirming our shared commitment to democracy, human dignity, and historical truth." Both statements are available in full on our website. Community leaders in one Lakeshore city want to make changes to bring more people to town, and they are asking for your input about what changes you want to see. 13 on your side's Lauren Baker spoke with members of the Grand Haven Main Street Board to find out why they want to see a change.
If you take a stroll on 7th Street on a rainy day, you'll find business owners like Joyce Workman.
You know, my husband calls this my happy place.
Owner of Vintage Green, placing her favorite newest items on display that are, you guessed it, vintage and green.
I had a bucket list with 5 things, and this was one of them, was to open my own vintage store. I was traveling for work. I left that job, opened this store, moved my parents here.
And just across the street,
I know, I can't believe it's been 31 years.
You'll find her friend and fellow business owner, Chris Weaver, selling food and drinks at JW's Food and Spirits, which some locals call the Cheers of Grand Haven.
My dad bought this for me when I was 27, and then I got my feet wet, got them under me, and then I bought it from him.
These two say they love having their businesses in the Main Street area of Grand Haven, but they want to see more, and they don't want to make those changes alone.
We want to make our community better. Our community is great, but we strive to make it better.
That's why these two, who are on the board of the Grand Haven Main Street organization, are asking people to chime in on what changes they want to see. Workman says after settling down from the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, she and others want to see more visitors and businesses.
As we look at the demographics of who comes to Grand Haven, we want to look at ways that we can get them to go to the beach, stay and have dinner. Then, when we have open buildings, we could say, this is who we are, this is where we're going, would you like to be part of this?
And with the help of the community, they say it will continue to help make Grand Haven a place for everyone.
We just want to be a fun, family-oriented town.
After relocating halfway across the world, one journalist from Nigeria traveled to one local university last week to share his story of resilience and a relentless pursuit of truth. We caught up with a man whose journey highlights the thin line between democracy and oppression. It was a long way from Nigeria to the United States.
Growing up as a young chap, I actually grew up witnessing all forms of deprivation, all forms of poverty.
Yet Haruna Muhammad Salisu found his way here after a unique journey.
After graduating as a journalist and believing that journalism is an instrument to hold power on check, I felt we have to have a voice that could amplify the voices of the marginalized.
So, following his early life, Salisu went on to publish WikiTimes, an investigative reporting outlet focusing on northern Nigeria. But as his work went on, Salisu faced what his online biography says were threats and lawsuits.
After starting the outlet, we started publishing a lot of hard-hitting stories that didn't go down well with most of the politicians.
When it comes to the kind of pressure he said he faced.
Is that like a new phenomena in Nigeria, or is this something that's routine?
No, it's not a new phenomenon. So you see, Nigeria as a democracy has a lot of weaknesses. Our democracy is not that vibrant, it's not that robust.
The pressure growing so great that he eventually fled the country. Now a graduate student at Indiana University, he's urging people in America to listen.
I'm not here to teach America anything, but I honestly feel that it's the right time for Americans to come to the table and have a conversation.
We caught up with Salisu as he prepared to give a lecture at Grand Valley State University last week.
The United States of America shouldn't abandon Nigeria at this time.
The U.S., he said, has been a major proponent of Nigeria's young democracy that began in earnest in 1999. And as a centuries-old democracy itself, America's situation, he feels, is unique from that of his own country.
One of the things, like I mentioned, that makes America a strong and vibrant democracy is the power of its institutions.
But he believes there's a thin line between democracy and autocracy.
Some of the antecedents we see today seem to suggest that America is drifting from the bureaucracy and the institutions that make it great into empowering individuals, right? And so for us in Africa, one of the things that, one of the major undoings of our democracy is that we have people that are more powerful, that are more stronger than the institutions.
And for both nations, he believes a singular principle rings true.
If there is no strong media institutions that will hold leaders accountable, there is every tendency that leaders will, abuse power. There is every tendency that we will see impunity in the land. But if media institutions are strong and vibrant enough, they will put power on check.
As for himself, he hopes he may return to Nigeria soon to continue his work.
It's very difficult, it's very challenging, but we are journalists, for goodness sake. And as journalists, if we didn't stand our ground to hold power to account, we will continue to see what we are seeing, which will continue to affect our people, and that is the most unfortunate thing to do.
And that's the rundown for your week in Michigan politics. Be sure to keep up with all the top political stories of the day, both on air and online at 13onyourside.com. We'll see you next week.